The clock on my dashboard read 3:47 p.m. when I pulled into the driveway of our family estate. I wasn't supposed to be here until 6, but the conference in Boston had ended early, and I'd caught an earlier flight home. The November air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and approaching winter. I grabbed my briefcase from the passenger seat, my heels clicking against the cobblestone path as I approached the grand oak doors of the house that had been in my husband's family for 3 generations. Marcus and I had been married for 23 years. 23 years of building a life together, of compromises and shared dreams, of raising our daughter Emma through her turbulent teenage years and watching her graduate from college. 23 years of believing I knew the man who shared my bed, who held my hand at family gatherings, who promised me forever on a rain-soaked afternoon in June all those years ago. Before we continue, if you're enjoying stories about hidden betrayals and shocking discoveries, please subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell, so you never miss a story that could change how you see the people closest to you. Your support means everything to us. I pushed open the front door, surprised to find it unlocked. Marcus's car was in the garage, along with another vehicle I didn't recognize, a sleek silver Mercedes with tinted windows. My stomach tightened with an inexplicable sense of unease. I set my briefcase down in the foyer, the marble floor amplifying the sound in the empty hallway. That's when I heard it. Voices drifting from Marcus's study, low and intimate, punctuated by laughter that made my blood run cold. One voice was unmistakably my husband's, that deep baritone I'd heard whisper sweet nothings into my ear for over 2 decades. The other voice was feminine, sultry, young. Too young. I moved toward the study like a woman in a dream, my feet carrying me forward even as my mind screamed at me to turn around, to leave, to preserve the illusion of the life I thought I had. The study door was slightly ajar, and through the narrow opening, I could see them. Marcus sat behind his mahogany desk, the one his father had commissioned from a craftsman in Vermont, the one that had witnessed 3 generations of family business decisions. But he wasn't conducting business now. Perched on the edge of that desk, her skirt riding dangerously high on her thighs, was a woman I'd never seen before. She couldn't have been more than 30, with cascading auburn hair and legs that seemed to go on forever. But it wasn't just her presence that stopped my heart. It was the way Marcus looked at her. It was the way his hand rested on her knee, possessive and familiar. It was the way she leaned into him, whispering something that made him throw his head back and laugh with an abandon I hadn't seen in years. My hand flew to my mouth, stifling the gasp that threatened to escape. I stood frozen, unable to move, unable to breathe, as I watched my husband's betrayal unfold before my eyes like a grotesque theater performance I was forced to witness. The woman slid off the desk, moving to stand behind Marcus, her hands sliding down his shoulders in a gesture so intimate it made me physically ill. She bent down, her lips close to his ear, and whispered something I couldn't quite hear. Marcus turned his head, and they kissed. Not the chaste peck of old friends or business associates. This was passionate, hungry, the kiss of 2 people who had done this many times before. I must have made a sound, some involuntary noise of pain and disbelief, because Marcus's head snapped toward the door. Our eyes met across the distance, and in that moment, I saw everything I needed to know. There was no shock in his expression, no guilty scrambling to explain or apologize. There was only a cold calculation, a momentary flash of annoyance at being discovered, followed quickly by something that looked almost like relief. The woman turned, following Marcus's gaze, and smiled at me. Actually smiled, as if my presence was merely an inconvenience rather than the shattering of a 23-year marriage. She had the audacity to smooth down her skirt and extend her hand toward me as she walked to the door. "Mrs. Thornton," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I'm Victoria Ashford. I've heard so much about you." I couldn't speak. My throat had closed. My tongue felt thick and useless in my mouth. I stared at her outstretched hand as if it were a snake ready to strike. Marcus rose from his chair, buttoning his suit jacket with the same casual grace he displayed at business meetings. "Angela," he said, my name sounding foreign on his lips. "You're home early." The absurdity of the statement, the sheer banality of it, broke through my paralysis. "I'm home early," I repeated, my voice hollow. "That's what you have to say to me?" Victoria, sensing the coming storm, grabbed her purse from one of the leather chairs. "I should go," she murmured, but Marcus caught her wrist. "No," he said firmly. "Stay. Angela, we need to talk." "We need to talk?" My voice was rising now, 2 decades of suppressed emotions bubbling to the surface. "We need to talk? I just caught you with another woman in our home, in your father's study, and you want to talk?" Marcus's jaw tightened, and I saw a flash of the man I'd fallen in love with, the passionate law student who had swept me off my feet at a university fundraiser. But that flash was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by the cold stranger who stood before me now. "You've known for months that things between us weren't working," he said, his voice measured and calm, as if we were discussing the weather rather than the destruction of our marriage. "Don't act so shocked, Angela. We've been living separate lives for years." The words hit me like physical blows. Separate lives? "We've been married for 23 years, Marcus. We have a daughter together. We've built a life. A life built on obligation and routine," he countered, taking a step toward me. "When was the last time we had a real conversation, Angela? When was the last time we laughed together, really laughed? You're so busy with your charity work and your book clubs and your yoga classes that you haven't noticed we stopped being partners years ago." I wanted to scream at him, to tell him he was wrong, but a small, traitorous part of my mind whispered that perhaps he had a point. When had we stopped connecting? When had the passionate love of our early years faded into comfortable coexistence? But that didn't excuse this. This betrayal, this violation of every vow we'd made to each other. "How long?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "How long has this been going on?" Marcus and Victoria exchanged a glance, and I saw something pass between them, some silent communication that spoke of an intimacy that should have been reserved for me. 6 months, Victoria answered, when Marcus remained silent. She had the audacity to look sympathetic, as if she were breaking bad news to a child. "I met Marcus at the Harrison merger negotiations. We were both working late one night and we just connected. 6 months. Half a year of lies and deception. Half a year of Marcus coming home to me, kissing me goodnight, while he was building a life with someone else." I thought back over the past 6 months, searching for signs I'd missed. The late nights at the office, the weekend business trips, the new cologne, the sudden interest in working out at the gym, the password change on his phone that he'd explained away as a security measure after a data breach at his firm. All of it had been there, right in front of me, and I'd been too trusting, too comfortable in my belief that we were solid to see what was happening. "I want you out," I said, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. "Both of you. Get out of my house." "Your house?" Marcus's eyebrows rose. "This house belongs to the Thornton Family Trust, Angela. You have no legal claim to it." The words were like ice water in my veins. The Thornton Family Trust. In all our years together, Marcus had always referred to this place as our home, but legally, he was right. The house, the estate, all of it was held in trust, controlled by Marcus and his father's estate. "Fine," I said, refusing to show weakness in front of them. "Then I'll leave. I'll pack my things and go." I turned to walk away, to retreat to the bedroom where I could break down in private, but Marcus's next words stopped me cold. "Before you go," he said, his voice taking on a businesslike tone that made my skin crawl, "there's something you should know. My father's will is being read next week. Given our current situation, I thought you should be aware that any inheritance provisions made for you may be reconsidered." I spun around to face him. "Your father's will? Harrison's will? He passed away 2 months ago, Marcus. He was cremated. The estate lawyer said the will wouldn't be read for at least 6 weeks. That's next week." Yes, Marcus said simply. And given the dissolution of our marriage, the family attorney has advised that certain provisions may need to be reviewed. Dissolution of our marriage? I felt like I was in a nightmare, each revelation worse than the last. We're not dissolved. We're still married. For now, Victoria interjected, and I saw Marcus shoot her a warning glance. She had the grace to look slightly chastened, but she didn't retreat from the room as she should have. The pieces began to fall into place in my mind, creating a picture so ugly I wanted to deny it. This is why, I said slowly, understanding dawning with horrible clarity. This is why you've been so distant. This is why you've been pushing me away. You knew your father was dying, and you knew what was in his will. Marcus's expression remained impassive, but I saw the truth in his eyes. Harrison Thornton had been a formidable man, built his commercial real estate empire from nothing, survived the recession that destroyed so many of his competitors. When he'd been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer 18 months ago, Marcus had become obsessed with spending time with him, taking over more of the business, positioning himself as the natural successor. I'd thought it was grief, the natural response of a son facing the loss of his father. Now I wondered if it had been something else entirely: calculation, planning, ensuring that he was the sole beneficiary of Harrison's considerable fortune. You don't know anything about my father's will, Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. Don't I? I challenged. Your father loved me, Marcus. He told me I was the daughter he never had. He made me feel like family in a way my own parents never did. Do you really think he would have left me with nothing? My father was a practical man, Marcus replied. He believed in blood ties and legacy. Whatever affection he had for you, he wouldn't have let that interfere with his plans for the Thornton estate. But I remembered the conversation I'd had with Harrison just 3 weeks before he died. I'd been sitting by his bedside in the hospice care facility, reading to him from the financial journals he still insisted on keeping up with, even as the cancer ravaged his body. He'd reached out with his skeletal hand, gripping mine with surprising strength. Angela, he'd said, his voice raspy from the morphine, I need you to know something. I've made provisions. When I'm gone, you'll be taken care of. Don't let Marcus tell you otherwise. At the time, I'd thought he was simply being kind, perhaps leaving me some personal item or a small monetary gift. But now, seeing the calculating look in my husband's eyes, I wondered if there was more to it. I'm going to pack my things, I said, turning away from them both. I'll be out of here tonight. Angela, wait, Marcus called after me, and I heard him follow me into the hallway. Victoria wisely remained in the study. This doesn't have to be ugly. We can handle this like adults. I whirled on him, years of suppressed anger finally finding voice. Like adults? You've been cheating on me for 6 months, Marcus. You've lied to me every single day. You've made a mockery of our marriage, of everything we built together. And you want to handle this like adults? You're being dramatic, he said, and the dismissiveness in his tone was almost worse than the betrayal itself. People grow apart, Angela. It happens. We can get divorced quietly, divide the assets, and both move on with our lives. Divide the assets, I repeated. What assets, Marcus? According to you, everything we have is in the family trust. The house, the investment properties, even the vacation home in the Hamptons. What exactly am I supposed to get in this quiet divorce of yours? He had the decency to look uncomfortable. You'll get your fair share, he said, but the words rang hollow. Will I? Or will you and your attorneys find a way to ensure that I walk away with as little as possible? How long have you been planning this, Marcus? How long have you been setting the stage to push me out? This is paranoid, he said, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. You're in shock. You're not thinking clearly. Why don't you take some time, calm down, and we can discuss this rationally tomorrow? I'm thinking perfectly clearly, I said. For the first time in months, maybe years, I'm seeing things exactly as they are. You've been manipulating me, haven't you? All those times you encouraged me to spend more time with my friends, to take that extended trip to France last year to visit my college roommate. You weren't being supportive. You were getting me out of the way so you could spend time with her." The guilty flicker in his eyes told me I'd hit the mark. "And your father's funeral," I continued, the memories flooding back with new clarity. "You barely spoke to me that day. You kept me at arm's length from all the family discussions, all the meetings with the attorneys. You told me you needed to handle things with your brother and sister, that it was family business. But you were protecting yourself, weren't you? Making sure I didn't hear anything about the will." "You're imagining things," Marcus said, but his voice lacked confidence. "Am I? We'll see what the attorney says when that will is read next week. We'll see exactly what your father intended, and we'll see if your manipulation extends to the grave." I left him standing in the hallway and climbed the stairs to our bedroom, each step feeling like a mile. The room that had been our sanctuary for so many years now felt like a prison. I pulled out my suitcases from the walk-in closet and began throwing clothes into them without any organization or care. My hands were shaking as I packed, adrenaline and shock making my movements jerky and uncoordinated. I grabbed toiletries from the bathroom, jewelry from my dresser, photograph albums from the shelves. I wanted to take everything that was mine, every piece of evidence that I had existed in this house, that I had been part of this family. As I was clearing out my nightstand drawer, my fingers brushed against something wedged in the back. I pulled it out and found myself holding an envelope, yellowed with age, addressed to me in Harrison's distinctive handwriting. The postmark showed it had been mailed 3 weeks before his death, but I'd never seen it before. With trembling fingers, I tore open the envelope and pulled out a single sheet of paper. The letter was brief, written in the shaky script of a dying man, but the words were clear. "My dearest Angela," it began. "If you're reading this, then I'm gone, and I can only hope that my final wishes are being honored. You have been the daughter of my heart, the woman who brought joy back into my son's life when I feared he would remain forever bitter after his first marriage failed. You have given me a grandchild I adore and brought grace and dignity to the Thornton name. Whatever happens with the estate, whatever Marcus may tell you, know that I have provided for you. The full details will be revealed at the reading of the will. Trust in my attorney, James Sullivan. He knows my wishes and has instructions to ensure they are carried out, regardless of any objections from my children. With all my love, Harrison." I read the letter 3 times, my heart pounding. Harrison had known. Somehow he had known what Marcus might try to do. But how? Had he suspected his son's character? Or had there been signs of Marcus's betrayal even then? Signs that a dying man's keen perception had caught. I folded the letter carefully and tucked it into my purse. This was evidence, proof that Harrison had intended for me to receive something from his estate. Whatever Marcus was planning, whatever scheme he had concocted with his attorneys, this letter might be my protection. I finished packing as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the bedroom. I took one last look around, saying a silent goodbye to the life I'd thought I had. Then I dragged my suitcases downstairs, my jewelry box tucked under one arm. Marcus was waiting for me at the bottom of the stairs, Victoria nowhere in sight. "Where will you go?" he asked, and for a moment, just a moment, I heard genuine concern in his voice. "Why do you care?" I asked, struggling with the weight of my luggage. He reached out to help me, but I jerked away from his touch. The hurt that flashed across his face was small satisfaction, but satisfaction nonetheless. "I do still care about you, Angela," he said quietly. "Despite everything, despite how things have ended, you were my wife for 23 years. I don't want to see you struggling." "Then you should have thought of that before you decided to betray everything we built together," I said. "I'll be staying with my sister until I figure out my next move. Your attorney can contact me there when the will is read." "Angela," he began, but I cut him off. "Don't, Marcus. Don't try to justify this or explain it away. Just don't. Whatever we had, whatever we were, it's over. You made that choice when you brought that woman into our home." I walked out of the Thornton estate with my head held high. though inside I was crumbling. I loaded my suitcases into my car and drove away without looking back, knowing that if I allowed myself even one glance in the rearview mirror, I might break down completely. My sister Rachel lived 40 minutes away in a modest colonial in the suburbs. She and I had always been close, despite the very different paths our lives had taken. She'd married young, had 3 kids, and built a comfortable middle-class life with her high school sweetheart. I'd always thought I had the better deal, married to Marcus with his family money and social connections. Now I wasn't so sure. Rachel took one look at my face when she opened the door and pulled me into her arms. "Oh, honey," she said, and that simple sympathy broke through my carefully maintained composure. I sobbed on her shoulder for what felt like hours while she just held me, rubbing my back and making soothing noises like she had when we were children and I'd skinned my knee. Finally, when I'd cried myself empty, she led me inside to her warm, cluttered kitchen and made us both tea. Her husband, Tom, tactfully made himself scarce, herding their teenage kids upstairs with promises of pizza for dinner. "Tell me everything," Rachel said, settling into the chair across from me. And I did. I told her about coming home early, about finding Marcus with Victoria, about the cold calculation in his eyes. I told her about the reading of the will, about Marcus's hints that my inheritance might be reconsidered. Finally, I showed her Harrison's letter. Rachel read it carefully, her expression growing more serious with each line. "This is significant," she said when she finished. "This shows clear intent on Harrison's part to provide for you. If Marcus tries to contest anything in the will, this letter could be crucial." "But why would Harrison write to me?" I asked. "Why not just put his wishes in the will?" "Because he knew Marcus," Rachel said quietly. "Angela, I never said anything because you seemed happy, but I always thought Marcus had a ruthless streak. Remember when his brother tried to start his own business using some of the family connections? Marcus destroyed him. He made sure every door was closed, every opportunity blocked. He wanted the family business for himself, and he didn't care who he had to step on to get it." I did remember. Marcus's younger brother, Jeffrey, had tried to start a property management company 5 years ago. Within 6 months, he was bankrupt and working as a manager for someone else's firm. At the time, Marcus had said it was just business, that Jeffrey should have known better than to compete directly with Thornton Enterprises. But looking back now with clear eyes, I could see the calculated cruelty in Marcus's actions. "Harrison saw that side of Marcus too," Rachel continued. "And he knew that if he left you anything substantial, Marcus would find a way to challenge it. But with this letter, with clear evidence of Harrison's intentions and affection for you, it becomes much harder for Marcus to claim that any inheritance you receive goes against his father's wishes." "I don't even know what's in the will," I said. "For all I know, Harrison left me a set of cufflinks or his collection of first edition books." "Maybe," Rachel said. "But Marcus wouldn't be this worried if it was something small. He's scared, Angela. He's scared that his father left you something significant, something that would give you power or independence." The reading of the will was scheduled for the following Tuesday at the offices of Harrison's longtime attorney, James Sullivan. The days leading up to it were some of the longest of my life. I stayed with Rachel, sleeping in her guest room and trying to piece together what was left of my shattered life. I met with a divorce attorney, a sharp woman named Patricia Hernandez, who came highly recommended. She listened to my story, took notes, and then looked at me with sympathy and resignation. "Mrs. Thornton," she said, "I'm going to be honest with you. If everything is in the family trust as your husband claims, you're in a difficult position. Massachusetts is not a community property state, and prenuptial agreements and family trusts can severely limit what a spouse receives in a divorce." "We didn't have a prenuptial agreement," I protested. "But the assets are in a trust," Patricia countered. "That changes things significantly. Trust assets are generally not considered marital property, which means they're not subject to division in a divorce." My stomach sank. "So, I get nothing? After 23 years of marriage, I walk away with nothing?" "Not nothing," Patricia said. You're entitled to half of any marital assets, anything acquired during the marriage that's not in the trust. You may also be entitled to alimony, depending on the circumstances. But the house, the investment properties, the business interests, if they're all held in trust, then legally they belong to the trust, not to your husband, and therefore not to the marriage. That can't be legal, I said. There has to be some protection for spouses. There is, to an extent, Patricia said. Courts can sometimes look at whether assets should have been marital property, whether the trust was used specifically to hide assets from a spouse. But these are difficult arguments to make, and they require extensive documentation and often years of litigation. I left her office feeling even more defeated than when I'd arrived. Marcus had been planning this, setting up the pieces years ago to ensure that if our marriage ended, he would retain everything. Or had it been Harrison, protecting the family assets from any potential divorces? Either way, the result was the same. I had spent over 2 decades building a life with Marcus, and I had nothing to show for it except a closet full of designer clothes and a broken heart. The day of the will reading arrived with cold rain pelting the windows of Rachel's house. I dressed carefully in a navy suit, wanting to look dignified and composed, even though I felt anything but. Rachel offered to come with me for moral support, but I declined. This was something I needed to face on my own. The offices of Sullivan and Associates occupied the top floor of a historic building in downtown Boston. The reception area was all dark wood and leather, the kind of old money elegance that Harrison had appreciated. A young receptionist led me to a conference room where several people were already gathered. Marcus sat at one end of the long table, Victoria beside him. I felt a flash of anger at her presence, but I suppressed it. This was not the time or place for emotional outbursts. Marcus's siblings, Jeffrey and Melissa, sat across from them, both nodding politely to me as I entered. We had never been close, but we had always been cordial. At the head of the table sat James Sullivan, a distinguished man in his 70s with silver hair and kind eyes. He rose as I entered, extending his hand. "Mrs. Thornton," he said warmly, "thank you for coming. I know this must be difficult for you." "Thank you, Mr. Sullivan," I replied, taking the seat he indicated, deliberately choosing one far from Marcus and Victoria. Once everyone was settled, James cleared his throat and opened a leather portfolio. "We are here for the reading of the last will and testament of Harrison Matthew Thornton," he began formally. Mr. Thornton was very specific in his wishes, and he took great care to ensure that his estate was distributed according to his values and priorities. He began reading, starting with small bequests to various charities and organizations Harrison had supported over the years. Then came the personal items, specific pieces being left to specific people. Harrison's watch collection went to Jeffrey, his books to Melissa. Various pieces of artwork and furniture were distributed among family members and close friends. I listened with growing confusion. I'd been mentioned several times, receiving Harrison's collection of rare first editions, a pearl necklace that had belonged to his mother, and a small monetary gift of $50,000. These were generous gifts, certainly, but they didn't explain Marcus's nervousness or Harrison's cryptic letter. Then James paused, looking directly at me. "And now we come to the primary distribution of the estate," he said. Harrison Thornton's estate is valued at approximately $78 million, including real estate holdings, business interests, investments, and liquid assets. I heard someone gasp, though I'm not sure if it was me or one of the others at the table. $78 million. I'd known Harrison was wealthy, but I hadn't realized the extent of his fortune. "Mr. Thornton has divided his estate as follows," James continued. "To his son, Jeffrey Thornton, a trust fund of $5 million and a portfolio of residential properties valued at approximately $8 million. To his daughter, Melissa Thornton, a trust fund of $5 million and the vacation property in Cape Cod, valued at approximately $3 million. Jeffrey and Melissa both looked pleased, if a bit disappointed that they weren't receiving more. Melissa shot a resentful look at Marcus, clearly assuming that he would receive the lion's share. To my son Marcus Thornton, James read, I leave controlling interest in Thornton Enterprises, my collection of vintage automobiles, and the Thornton family estate, with the following conditions. Here James paused, his eyes scanning the document before him. I saw Marcus lean forward, a small smile playing at his lips. The transfer of these assets is contingent upon Marcus's marriage to Angela Cole Thornton remaining intact and in good standing, James read, and I felt the world tilt beneath me. In the event of divorce or legal separation initiated by Marcus within 5 years of my death, ownership of Thornton Enterprises will pass to a charitable trust to be administered by James Sullivan, and the family estate will be transferred to Angela Cole Thornton. The silence in the room was absolute. Marcus had gone pale, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of the table. Victoria's mouth had fallen open in shock. Jeffrey and Melissa looked between their brother and me, clearly trying to process what they'd just heard. That can't be legal, Marcus said finally, his voice hoarse. He can't put conditions on an inheritance like that. Actually, he can, James said calmly. Harrison was very careful to structure his will in a way that would withstand legal challenges. He consulted with several attorneys to ensure that his wishes would be honored. But this is ridiculous, Marcus protested, rising from his chair. He's trying to control my life from beyond the grave. He's trying to protect his daughter-in-law, James corrected gently. Harrison was very fond of Angela. He told me on several occasions that she was the best thing that ever happened to you, Marcus. He wanted to ensure that she was taken care of, and he suspected that you might not do so on your own. I sat frozen, unable to process what I was hearing. Harrison had known. Somehow, he had known that Marcus might betray me, and he had built protections into his will to prevent it. There's more, James continued, his eyes finding mine again. To Angela Cole Thornton, in recognition of her years of service to the Thornton family and her unwavering support of my son Marcus, I leave a trust fund of $15 million to be administered independently of any marital assets and protected from any claims by Marcus Thornton or his creditors in the event of divorce or legal separation. $15 million. I couldn't breathe. $15 million, that was mine, regardless of what happened with my marriage. Harrison had given me financial independence, had ensured that I would never be at Marcus's mercy. This is insane, Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. I'll contest this. I'll have it overturned. You can certainly try, James said. But I should warn you that Harrison anticipated this possibility. He left very detailed instructions about his reasoning and his mental state at the time he drafted the will. He was of sound mind, had multiple psychiatric evaluations to prove it, and made his intentions abundantly clear. Any legal challenge will be expensive and almost certainly unsuccessful. Marcus slumped back into his chair, the fight draining out of him. Victoria placed a hand on his arm, but he shook her off irritably. There is one final provision, James said, and I dragged my attention back to him. Harrison included a letter to be read only in the event that his conditions regarding Marcus's marriage were relevant. Based on what I've learned from Angela in our preliminary conversations, I believe we've reached that point. He pulled out an envelope and opened it, removing several handwritten pages. This is in Harrison's own words, he said, then began to read. My dearest family, the letter began. If you are hearing this, it means that my worst fears have been realized. Marcus, my son, has chosen to end his marriage to Angela, the finest woman I have ever known outside of your dear mother. I write this not out of spite or a desire to control you from beyond death, but out of love for all of you and a hope that perhaps these words will make you understand the gravity of what you're doing. Marcus, when you married Angela, I saw you transform. The angry, bitter young man who had sworn off love after your first marriage ended became gentle again, became hopeful. Angela brought light into your life and into this family. She gave us Emma, my precious granddaughter, and she stood by your side through every challenge and setback. But I am not blind, my son. I see the darkness that lives in your heart, the ruthless ambition that sometimes overwhelms your better nature. I see the way you calculate and plan, always thinking 3 steps ahead, always considering how every action will benefit you. These traits made you an excellent businessman, but they make you a dangerous husband. I have structured my will as I have because I know you, Marcus. I know that without consequences, you would divorce Angela and leave her with nothing, congratulating yourself on your cleverness in keeping all assets in the family trust. I know that you would justify it to yourself, would find ways to blame her for the failure of your marriage, would tell yourself that she should have seen it coming. So I am forcing your hand, my son. If you want the business I built, if you want the legacy I've created, you will stay married to Angela and you will treat her with the respect and love she deserves. And if you choose instead to follow your selfish impulses, then the business will go to charity, where it can do some good in the world, and Angela will have the family home where she raised your daughter and built a life. To Angela, if you are hearing this, I am so deeply sorry. I am sorry that my son has failed you. I am sorry that I raised a man capable of such betrayal. But I want you to know that you are not alone and you are not without resources. The money I am leaving you is yours, free and clear. Use it to build a new life, to pursue dreams you may have set aside during your marriage. You deserve happiness, my dear girl, and I hope you find it. To Jeffrey and Melissa, I know you may feel that your inheritance is less than you deserve. But understand that I am giving you freedom. The money and properties I leave you are yours to do with as you wish. You are not burdened with conditions or expectations. You can build your lives on your own terms. Marcus, you alone bear the weight of conditions, because you alone have the potential to cause great harm with the power I would give you. I pray that you will make the right choice, that you will honor your marriage and your wife. But if not, then at least Angela will be protected, and the business I built will serve a greater purpose than feeding your ego. With all my love and all my hope for each of you, Harrison. The silence that followed the reading was deafening. I could see tears on Melissa's face, and even Jeffrey looked moved. Marcus sat rigid in his chair, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. "That's everything," James said quietly. "I'll need signatures on various documents, and we'll need to schedule follow-up meetings to transfer assets and establish the trusts. But the essentials are as you've heard them." Marcus stood abruptly, knocking his chair backward. "This is emotional blackmail," he said. "My father had no right to manipulate me like this." "Your father had every right to distribute his assets as he saw fit," James said firmly, "and he chose to protect the woman you promised to love and honor. If you find that manipulative, perhaps you should examine your own intentions." Marcus turned to Victoria, who had been sitting silently through the entire reading, her face growing paler with each revelation. "Let's go," he said tersely. But Victoria didn't move. She was staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Fear? Calculation? Regret? "Marcus," she said slowly, "maybe we should talk about this." "There's nothing to talk about," he snapped. This is exactly what I expected from him, always trying to control everything, even from the grave. "But Marcus," Victoria pressed, her voice taking on a wheedling quality, "this changes things. If you divorce Angela, you lose the business. You lose everything you've worked for." And there it was, the moment of truth. I watched as understanding dawned on Marcus's face, as he realized what Victoria was really saying. She hadn't fallen in love with Marcus Thornton, struggling businessman. She'd fallen for Marcus Thornton, heir to a fortune, and now that fortune was conditional on him staying married to me. "So that's what this is about," Marcus said bitterly. "You're just like everyone else. All you care about is the money." "That's not fair," Victoria protested, but her voice lacked conviction. "I love you, Marcus, but we have to be practical. If you lose the business, what kind of life can we have together?" I almost felt sorry for Marcus in that moment. Almost. He'd thought he'd found someone who wanted him for himself, who loved him despite his flaws. Instead, he'd found someone just as calculating as he was, someone who'd seen an opportunity and taken it. "Get out," Marcus said to Victoria, his voice low and dangerous. "Get out of here. Now." Victoria's eyes widened. "Marcus, please, let's just talk about this reasonably." "I said get out," he roared, and Victoria flinched. She grabbed her purse and fled from the conference room, her heels clicking frantically on the marble floor. The rest of us sat in uncomfortable silence. Jeffrey cleared his throat. "Well," he said, "this has been illuminating." "Shut up, Jeffrey," Marcus said wearily, collapsing back into his chair. He looked old suddenly, older than his 52 years. "Just shut up." James Sullivan closed his portfolio and looked at each of us in turn. "I understand that this is a lot to process," he said. "I'm available to answer questions and facilitate the transfer of assets. Angela, I'll need to meet with you privately to discuss the administration of your trust fund." I nodded, still too shocked to speak. $15 million, financial independence, security for the rest of my life. Harrison had given me freedom, had ensured that whatever happened with my marriage, I would be able to build a life on my own terms. "Marcus," James said gently, "your father loved you. Never doubt that. But he also knew your weaknesses, and he tried to protect you from your worst impulses. This will is his final act of love, even if it doesn't feel that way right now." Marcus didn't respond. He sat slumped in his chair, staring at the table, a man who'd had everything and lost it through his own choices. Melissa rose and walked around the table to me. "Angela," she said quietly, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what Marcus did to you, and I'm sorry if we didn't make you feel more supported as part of this family. Dad was right about you. You were always too good for us." I managed a weak smile. "Thank you, Melissa. That means a lot." Jeffrey nodded at me as he stood to leave. "If you need anything," he said, "references for attorneys, help moving your things, anything at all, you call me. You're still family, Angela, no matter what my idiot brother has done." They left together, leaving me alone with James and Marcus. The silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken words and shattered dreams. Finally, Marcus looked up at me. "What are you going to do?" he asked. "What am I going to do?" I repeated. "I'm going to divorce you, Marcus. I'm going to take my $15 million and build a life that doesn't involve lying and betrayal. I'm going to find out who Angela Thornton is when she's not trying to be the perfect wife to a man who doesn't value her." "The house," Marcus said. "If we divorce, you get the house." "I know," I said. "Your father made sure I'd have a home, no matter what." Marcus laughed, but it was a bitter sound without humor. He was cleverer than I gave him credit for. He knew exactly how to trap me. Stay married to you and keep the business, or divorce you and lose everything. "You could choose to stay married," I said, though the thought made me feel ill. "You could send Victoria away. We could try to work things out." "Could we?" Marcus asked, and for the first time since I'd caught him with Victoria, I heard genuine emotion in his voice. "Could you really forgive this, Angela? Could you really look at me every day and not remember what I did? Could we rebuild trust after I've destroyed it so completely?" I wanted to say yes. Some part of me, the part that had loved this man for 23 years, wanted to believe that we could overcome this, that our marriage could survive his betrayal. But I knew the truth. "No," I said quietly. "I don't think we could. Too much has been broken, Marcus. Even if we tried to put it back together, we'd always see the cracks." He nodded slowly. "Then I guess I've lost everything," he said. "The business, the house, you. All because I was stupid enough to think I could have it all." "You didn't lose it," I corrected him. "You threw it away. You made a choice, Marcus. You chose Victoria over me. You chose a 6-month affair over a 23-year marriage. You chose selfish pleasure over honor and commitment. These are the consequences of that choice. I stood, gathering my purse. James, I'll call your office to schedule that meeting about the trust fund. Thank you for executing Harrison's wishes so faithfully. It was my honor, James said. Harrison was a good man, and he wanted to do right by you. I'm glad I could help him achieve that. I walked toward the door, but Marcus's voice stopped me. Angela, he said, and I turned back to him. I did love you. Maybe not the way I should have, maybe not enough, but I did love you. I know, I said, and realized it was true. Marcus had loved me in his own limited, self-centered way. It just hadn't been enough. But love without respect, without honor, without faithfulness, that's not really love at all. That's just convenient affection. I left him sitting in that conference room and walked out into the cold November afternoon. The rain had stopped, and weak sunlight was breaking through the clouds. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, breathing in the crisp air, feeling the weight of the past weeks lifting from my shoulders. I pulled out my phone and called Rachel. It's over, I said when she answered. Harrison left me $15 million, and if Marcus divorces me, I get the house. Rachel screamed so loudly I had to hold the phone away from my ear. Are you serious? Oh my God, Angela, Harrison was a genius. He was, I agreed, feeling tears prick my eyes. He knew, Rachel. Somehow he knew what Marcus would do, and he protected me. Come home, Rachel said. Come back to my house and we'll celebrate. Tom will open that expensive bottle of wine he's been saving, and we'll order in from that Italian place you love. I'll be there in an hour, I said. I just need to stop somewhere first. I drove through the city to the cemetery where Harrison was buried. It was a beautiful spot, on a hill overlooking the city he'd loved. I'd been here for his funeral, but I hadn't been back since. Now I walked through the rows of headstones until I found his, a simple granite marker with his name and dates, and beneath them the words, Beloved Father and Friend. I knelt beside the grave, not caring that the wet grass was soaking through my expensive suit pants. Thank you, I whispered. Thank you for seeing me, for valuing me, for protecting me. Thank you for being the father I never had, and for loving me enough to shield me from your son's worst impulses. I promise I'll use this gift wisely. I promise I'll build a life that would make you proud. The wind rustled through the trees, and I imagined I could hear Harrison's voice in it, warm and approving. I stayed there for a long time, saying goodbye to the man who had been my father-in-law, my mentor, and ultimately my savior. Over the next few weeks, the full implications of Harrison's will became clear. Marcus was trapped in an impossible situation. If he stayed married to me, he kept the business, but remained tied to a woman who could barely stand to look at him. If he divorced me, he lost everything he'd worked for his entire life. He chose the business. Of course he did. I'd known he would. Marcus had always been ambitious above all else, had always valued success and power over personal relationships. He called me 3 days after the will reading and asked if we could come to an arrangement. An arrangement? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. A marriage in name only, he said. We maintain separate residences, separate lives, but legally we remain married. You get your $15 million, I keep the business. We both get what we want. What I want is a divorce, I said. I want to be free of you, Marcus. I want to rebuild my life without having you hovering in the background. I'll give you the house immediately, he offered. I'll sign it over to you right now before the divorce is final. You'll have complete ownership, no strings attached. I was tempted, I won't lie. The Thornton estate had been my home for over 2 decades. I'd raised Emma there, had planted the roses in the garden, had chosen every piece of furniture and artwork. The thought of owning it outright, of not having to leave, was appealing. But I thought about Harrison's letter, about his hope that I would use this opportunity to build a new life. And I realized that staying in that house, living in the shadow of my failed marriage, would be a prison of a different kind. No, I said. I don't want the house. I don't want anything that ties me to you or the Thornton family. I'll take my $15 million and my personal belongings. You can keep everything else. But the will, Marcus started. The will says I get the house if you divorce me, I interrupted. But it doesn't say I have to accept it. I can refuse the transfer. The house will revert to the estate, and your siblings can fight over what to do with it. I don't care. I just want out, Marcus. I want to be done with all of this. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Finally, Marcus said, "You're really going to do this? You're going to force me to choose between you and everything I've built?" "No," I said. "You already made that choice when you brought Victoria into our home. I'm just refusing to make it easy for you. If you want to keep the business that badly, stay married to me. We'll be miserable together, or divorce me and lose everything. Either way, you don't get to have it all anymore. Your father made sure of that." I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking, but I felt oddly calm. For the first time in my adult life, I was making decisions based solely on what I wanted, not what was expected of me, or what would keep the peace, or what would make someone else happy. Patricia Hernandez, my divorce attorney, was thrilled when I told her about Harrison's will. "This changes everything," she said. "Marcus has no leverage now. We can push for a generous settlement on top of your inheritance." "I don't want his money," I said. "I just want out." "Angela," Patricia said gently, "I understand you're hurt and you want to be done with this. But you're entitled to compensation for 23 years of marriage. Even with your inheritance, you should make him pay for what he's done." But I didn't want Marcus's money. I didn't want anything from him except my freedom. We eventually settled on terms that gave me the $15 million from Harrison's estate, half of our joint savings account, which amounted to another $200,000, my car, my personal belongings, and my jewelry. Marcus kept everything else, including the business and the house. Emma, our daughter, was devastated by the divorce. She just started her first job after college, was building her own life in New York, and suddenly her parents' 23-year marriage was imploding. I met her for dinner at a restaurant in Manhattan, neutral territory where we could talk without the weight of family history pressing down on us. "I can't believe Dad did this," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I can't believe he cheated on you. You guys were supposed to be solid. You were supposed to be the example of how marriage should work." "Oh, sweetheart," I said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "I'm so sorry. I know this is hard for you." "Were there signs?" she asked. "Things I should have seen?" "Maybe," I admitted. Looking back, there were things that seemed suspicious now. But at the time, I trusted your father. I believed in our marriage. Sometimes we don't see what we don't want to see. "How did Grandpa know?" Emma asked. "How did he know to structure his will that way?" I pulled out Harrison's letter, the one I'd found in my nightstand, and showed it to her. She read it slowly, more tears falling as she absorbed her grandfather's words. "He was protecting you," she said finally. "He knew Dad might do something like this, and he made sure you'd be okay." "He gave me freedom," I said. "He gave me the ability to walk away from your father without being left destitute. That's an incredible gift." "What are you going to do now?" Emma asked. "Where will you live?" "I don't know yet," I admitted. "For now, I'm staying with Aunt Rachel, but I'm thinking about buying a place of my own, something that's just mine. Maybe a condo in the city, or a small house by the ocean. Somewhere I can start fresh." "Can I help you look?" Emma asked, and I saw the little girl she'd been in her hopeful expression. "I would love that," I said. "We'll make a weekend of it. Look at properties, have nice dinners, spend time together." "I'm so angry at Dad," Emma said. "I don't know if I can forgive him for this." "You don't have to decide that right now," I told her. "It's okay to be angry. It's okay to feel betrayed. Your relationship with your father is separate from your relationship with me, and you need to work through your feelings in your own time. But he hurt you, she said. He destroyed our family. He made a terrible choice, I agreed. But he's still your father, Emma. And despite everything, I don't want you to lose that relationship because of what happened between him and me. Eventually, when the anger fades a little, you might be able to find a way forward with him. You're being way more generous than he deserves, Emma muttered, but I could see she was considering my words. The divorce was finalized 6 weeks later. I signed the papers in Patricia's office, my hand steady on the pen. Marcus wasn't there. We'd agreed to handle everything through our attorneys, avoiding any further direct contact. "How do you feel?" Patricia asked when it was done. "Free," I said, surprised to realize it was true. Sad and hurt and angry, but also free. Like I've been carrying a weight for so long that I'd forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. With Emma's help, I found a beautiful condo in Back Bay, all windows and light, with a view of the Charles River. It was smaller than the Thornton estate, less grand, but it was mine. Every piece of furniture, every painting on the walls, every plant on the balcony, I chose myself, with no consideration for anyone else's taste or approval. I started volunteering at a women's shelter, working with women who were trying to escape abusive relationships. My experience, my resources, suddenly had purpose. I could help these women in ways I couldn't have before, could use my money and my connections to give them opportunities they'd never had. I also started writing. I'd always wanted to write, had filled journals with observations and ideas throughout my marriage, but I'd never had the time or mental space to pursue it seriously. Now, I spent my mornings in my new home office, looking out over the river, putting words on the page. I wrote about marriage and betrayal, about trust and forgiveness, about finding yourself again after losing sight of who you were. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. I almost didn't answer it, but something made me pick up. "Angela?" The voice was tentative, apologetic. "It's Victoria Ashford." I almost hung up immediately, but curiosity held me back. "What do you want, Victoria?" "I need to apologize," she said. "For what I did, for the role I played in destroying your marriage. I know you don't want to hear from me, but I had to try to say, I'm sorry." "Why now?" I asked. "Why 6 months later?" "Because I'm where you were," she said, and I heard tears in her voice. "I'm the one who's been betrayed. Marcus moved on to someone else, someone younger, someone who doesn't know about his pattern yet. And I realized what I did to you, how I justified it to myself by pretending Marcus and I were in love, that what we had was special. But I was just another conquest, another ego boost for him. And now I know how you must have felt. I should have felt satisfaction, vindication even. But mostly I just felt sad. Sad for Victoria, sad for Marcus, sad for all of us who'd been caught up in this ugly situation. "I appreciate the apology," I said finally. "But I can't absolve you, Victoria. What you did was wrong, and you knew it was wrong when you were doing it. You saw what Marcus was willing to do to his wife of 23 years, and you thought you'd be different, that he'd treat you better. That was naive." "I know," she whispered. "I know that now. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry, and that you were right to walk away. You're stronger than I ever gave you credit for." We hung up shortly after that. I never heard from Victoria again, but I'd like to think she learned something from the experience, that maybe she became more careful with other people's hearts. As for Marcus, I heard through Emma that he was struggling. The business was doing fine, but he was isolated, cut off from the family connections that Harrison had spent decades building. Melissa and Jeffrey had made it clear whose side they were on, and the social circles that had once welcomed Marcus as Harrison's heir now viewed him with suspicion and disapproval. He'd gone through 3 relationships in 6 months, each woman younger than the last, each relationship burning out spectacularly. He was chasing something he couldn't define, trying to fill a void that no amount of money or success or sexual conquest could satisfy. I didn't take pleasure in his suffering, but I didn't mourn for him either. Marcus had made his choices, and he was living with the consequences. That was justice of a kind. A year after the divorce, I was invited to speak at a fundraiser for the women's shelter where I volunteered. I'd been hesitant at first, unsure about sharing my story publicly, but the shelter director convinced me that my experience could help other women understand that betrayal and divorce weren't the end of the world, that life could begin again at 50, that financial security and independence were possible even after decades of depending on someone else. I stood at the podium looking out at the crowd of donors and supporters and told my story. I talked about arriving home early and discovering Marcus's betrayal. I talked about the devastation and the fear, the feeling that my entire world had been built on lies. And then I talked about Harrison's will, about the gift he'd given me, not just the money, but the freedom to choose myself, to build a life on my own terms. I won't lie to you, I said to the room full of people hanging on my every word. The past year has been hard. There have been days when I wondered if I made the right choice, if I should have tried harder to save my marriage, if I should have been willing to overlook Marcus's betrayal for the sake of the life we'd built together. But every time I had those doubts, I reminded myself of something Harrison wrote in his final letter to me. He said I deserved happiness, not comfort, not security, not the respectability of a long marriage. Happiness. And you know what I've learned? Happiness doesn't come from having the perfect life or the perfect marriage. It comes from living authentically, from making choices that honor who you truly are, from surrounding yourself with people who value you for more than what you can provide for them. I'm happier now, living in my small condo, writing my book, volunteering here at the shelter, than I ever was in that grand estate, playing the role of the perfect wife. The applause was thunderous, and I saw tears on many faces in the crowd. After the speech, woman after woman approached me, sharing their own stories of betrayal and survival, of leaving marriages that had become prisons, of finding themselves again after years of losing their identities in their relationships. One woman, probably in her mid-30s, grabbed my hand with tears streaming down her face. "My husband has been cheating on me for 2 years," she whispered. "I just found out. We have 2 young children, and I don't know how I'll support them on my own. But hearing your story gives me hope that it's possible to start over." I gave her my card, with my personal phone number written on the back. "Call me," I said. "Anytime, day or night. I'll help you figure this out. You're not alone." That became my mission in the months that followed. I used Harrison's gift to help other women escape bad marriages, to fund legal support and temporary housing, to provide job training and childcare assistance. I created a foundation in Harrison's name, dedicated to supporting women in transition, women who were finding the courage to leave relationships that no longer served them. Emma became involved with the foundation too, using her marketing skills to raise awareness and funds. Working together on something meaningful helped heal the rift that Marcus's betrayal had created in our family. We grew closer than we'd ever been, 2 women supporting each other through difficult times, building something positive from the wreckage of our old life. 2 years after the divorce, I was having dinner with Emma at a new restaurant in Cambridge when I saw Marcus across the room. He was alone, hunched over his plate, looking older and more tired than I'd ever seen him. Our eyes met, and I saw something in his expression that looked almost like regret. He stood and walked over to our table, hesitating a few feet away. "Angela," he said quietly. "Emma, I don't want to intrude, but I wondered if I could speak with you for just a moment." Emma's jaw tightened, but I nodded. "You have 2 minutes," I said. Marcus pulled up a chair, uninvited, and sat down. Up close, I could see the toll the past 2 years had taken on him. His hair had gone almost completely gray, deep lines etched around his eyes and mouth. He looked like a man carrying a heavy burden. "I wanted to apologize," he said, his voice rough. "I know it's too little, too late, but I need to say it. What I did to you was unconscionable. I betrayed you. I disrespected you. I threw away the best thing that ever happened to me because I was arrogant enough to think I deserved more, deserved better. I was wrong, Angela. About everything. What brought this on? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. I've been in therapy, Marcus admitted, working through some things. My therapist helped me see that I've spent my entire life chasing something I can't define, trying to prove something to my father, to myself, to the world. And in the process, I destroyed the one genuine relationship I had. You loved me, Angela. Really loved me. Not my money or my name or what I could do for you. And I threw that away. Yes, you did, I said simply. There was no point in pretending otherwise. I heard about the foundation, he continued. What you're doing to help women who are going through what you went through. That's incredible, Angela. Dad would have been so proud of you. He would have been ashamed of you, Emma interjected, her voice cold. Grandpa knew exactly what kind of man you are, Dad. That's why he structured his will the way he did. Marcus flinched, but didn't argue. You're right, he said to Emma. Your grandfather saw my flaws more clearly than I saw them myself. I just wish I'd listened to him when he tried to warn me, to guide me toward being a better man. Is that all you wanted to say? I asked. Because our food is getting cold. No, Marcus said. There's something else. I'm selling the business. I'm stepping down from Thornton Enterprises and letting Jeffrey take over. He's always been better at the people side of things anyway, and the business will thrive under his leadership. I'm going to travel, maybe do some volunteer work abroad, try to figure out who I am when I'm not defined by my father's legacy or my own ambition. I was genuinely surprised. That's a big decision, I said. It's overdue, Marcus replied. I've realized that I've spent my entire life building a business, accumulating wealth and power, and I have nothing to show for it except a failed marriage, a strained relationship with my daughter, and a father who died disappointed in the man I'd become. It's time to try a different path. I hope you find what you're looking for, I said, and meant it. I didn't love Marcus anymore, didn't even particularly like him, but I didn't wish him ill either. He was a flawed man who'd made terrible choices, but he was still human, still capable of growth and change. Marcus stood, nodding to both of us. Thank you for listening, he said. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, either of you, but I hope someday you might be able to think of me without quite so much anger and disappointment. He walked away, and Emma and I sat in silence for a moment, processing the unexpected encounter. Do you think he means it? Emma asked finally. Or is this just another manipulation? I think he means it, I said thoughtfully. Whether he'll actually follow through, whether he's capable of real change, I don't know. But I think for the first time in his life, Marcus is genuinely trying to examine who he is and whether he likes what he sees. Does it make you feel better? Emma asked, knowing he regrets what he did. No, I admitted, because his regret doesn't undo the betrayal. It doesn't give me back those 23 years or erase the pain he caused. But it does mean that maybe, someday, you might be able to have a relationship with your father again. And that matters to me, because you deserve to have both your parents in your life, even if your parents can't be together. Emma reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You're amazing, Mom. After everything he did to you, you still want me to have a relationship with him. I don't know if I could be that generous. It's not generosity, I said. It's just recognizing that the story isn't only about me and Marcus. You're part of this too, and you've already lost so much. I don't want you to lose your father entirely if there's a chance for reconciliation. 3 years after the divorce, I published my book. It was part memoir, part self-help guide, chronicling my journey from betrayed wife to independent woman. I wrote about the signs I'd missed, the red flags I'd ignored, the ways I'd made myself smaller to fit into Marcus's life and vision. But I also wrote about healing, about rediscovering who I was beneath the roles I'd played for so long, about building a life that felt authentic and true. The book became a surprising bestseller. Apparently there were a lot of women out there who related to my story, who saw themselves in my experiences. I started getting invited to speak at conferences and workshops, sharing my story and encouraging other women to choose themselves, to prioritize their own happiness and well-being. I also started dating again, tentatively at first. The thought of trusting another man after Marcus's betrayal was terrifying, but I reminded myself that not all men were like Marcus. I went on awkward first dates, suffered through bad conversations and worse dinners, laughed at myself when things went wrong, and gradually became more comfortable with the idea of letting someone new into my life. His name was Daniel, and I met him at a fundraising event for the foundation. He was a psychologist who worked with trauma survivors, divorced himself after a painful split from his wife of 15 years. We bonded over our shared experiences of betrayal and healing, over our commitment to helping others navigate difficult transitions. Daniel was nothing like Marcus. He was thoughtful where Marcus had been impulsive, empathetic where Marcus had been self-centered, content where Marcus had been endlessly ambitious. He made me laugh, challenged me intellectually, and most importantly, he saw me as a complete person, not just an accessory to his life or a means to an end. "I'm not looking for someone to complete me," I told him on our third date, wanting to be honest about where I stood. "I've spent too long defining myself through my relationship with someone else. I need to know that I'm whole on my own." "I'm not looking to complete you," Daniel said with a gentle smile. "I'm looking to complement you, to walk beside you, not in front of you or behind you, to build something together while still maintaining our individual identities." It was exactly what I needed to hear. We took things slowly, building a foundation of friendship and trust before moving into deeper intimacy. There was no rush, no pressure. We were both adults who'd been through the fire and come out the other side. We knew what we wanted, and more importantly, what we didn't want. 4 years after my divorce, Daniel proposed, not with grand gestures or public declarations, but quietly, over dinner in my condo, looking out at the river we both loved. "I want to spend my life with you," he said simply. "Not because I need you to be happy, but because being with you makes my happiness richer, deeper, more complete. Will you marry me?" I said yes, surprising myself with how certain I felt. This was different from my first marriage, built on mature love rather than youthful passion, on clear-eyed understanding rather than romantic illusions. Daniel knew my history, my scars, my fears, and he loved me anyway. Not despite my imperfections, but including them. Emma cried when I told her, happy tears this time. "I'm so glad you found someone, Mom," she said. "You deserve this. You deserve to be loved the way you should have been loved all along." We had a small ceremony, just family and close friends, on a beach in Maine. I wore a simple white dress, carried wildflowers, and spoke vows I'd written myself about partnership and respect, about loving with eyes open and hearts unguarded. Daniel cried when I promised to walk beside him through whatever life brought us, and I cried when he promised to honor my independence even as we built a life together. Marcus sent a gift, a beautiful antique clock with a note that said simply, "To new beginnings and second chances. May you both find the happiness I failed to give you." It was gracious and appropriate, and I appreciated the gesture, even though Marcus himself wasn't at the wedding. Some wounds heal, but the scars remain, and his presence would have been a reminder of pain better left in the past. 5 years after the divorce, I was invited back to the law offices of Sullivan and Associates for a meeting. James Sullivan, now in his late 70s and semi-retired, wanted to discuss the final distribution of Harrison's estate. I drove into the city on a crisp autumn morning, the trees ablaze with color, thinking about how much had changed since that terrible day when I'd learned the full extent of Marcus's betrayal. James greeted me warmly, ushering me into the same conference room where Harrison's will had been read all those years ago. But this time, there was no drama, no tension, just a simple transfer of final assets. "Angela," James said, pulling out a folder, "there's one last provision in Harrison's will that I've been holding until the appropriate time. Harrison specified that 5 years after his death, if you had successfully rebuilt your life, and found happiness, I was to give you this." He handed me an envelope, sealed with wax bearing the Thornton family crest. I opened it with trembling hands and found another letter from Harrison, this one dated just days before his death. "My dearest Angela," it read, "if James is giving you this letter, it means 5 years have passed since I left this world, and you have survived the storm I feared Marcus would bring into your life. I hope you have found happiness, my dear girl. I hope you have discovered who you are beyond the roles of wife and daughter-in-law. I hope you have built a life that brings you joy. I want you to know that watching you become part of our family was one of the great pleasures of my later years. You brought grace and kindness to the Thornton name, and you gave me a granddaughter who is the light of my life. Whatever Marcus may have done, whatever mistakes he may have made, none of that diminishes what you contributed to this family. I've left instructions with James for one final gift. There is a property in Vermont, a small farmhouse on 50 acres that I purchased years ago as a retreat. I've kept it separate from the family trust, specifically so I could leave it to you without any conditions or complications. It's yours, free and clear, to do with as you wish. Keep it as a retreat, sell it, turn it into a sanctuary for your foundation, whatever feels right to you. I only ask one thing. When you visit the property, spend an afternoon on the back porch at sunset. That's where I went when I needed to think, to pray, to remember what mattered. It's a place of peace, Angela, and you deserve peace after all you've been through. With all my love and all my pride in the woman you are and the woman you will become, Harrison." Tears streamed down my face as I read the letter. Even in death, Harrison was taking care of me, was ensuring that I had resources and options and freedom. The gift wasn't about money or property value. It was about giving me a place of my own, a sanctuary where I could go to heal or celebrate or simply be. "The property is beautiful," James said gently. "I've been maintaining it per Harrison's instructions. The house has been updated, the land is well tended. Whenever you're ready, I'll arrange for you to visit and sign the transfer papers." "Thank you, James," I managed to say through my tears. "Thank you for honoring Harrison's wishes so faithfully all these years." "It's been my privilege," James said. "Harrison was my friend as well as my client, and seeing his plans come to fruition, seeing you thrive despite the obstacles Marcus placed in your path, that's been incredibly gratifying." I visited the Vermont property the following weekend, bringing Daniel and Emma with me. It was exactly as James had described, a beautiful farmhouse with views of rolling hills and mountains in the distance. The back porch wrapped around 3 sides of the house, and as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple, I understood why Harrison had loved this place. "This is incredible, Mom," Emma breathed, standing beside me and watching the sunset. "What are you going to do with it?" I thought about Harrison's suggestion, about turning it into a sanctuary for the foundation. But as I stood there, feeling the peace of the place seep into my bones, I knew what Harrison would really want me to do. "I'm going to keep it," I said. "As a retreat, a place where I can come to write and think and remember everything I've learned. But I'll also open it to women from the foundation who need a place to heal, who need space and quiet and beauty while they figure out their next steps." "That's perfect," Daniel said, wrapping his arm around my waist. "A place of transformation. From pain to healing, from endings to new beginnings." That's exactly what it became. I spent several weeks each year at the farmhouse, writing and reflecting, and the rest of the time it served as a retreat for women in transition. We called it Harrison's Haven, and over the years, hundreds of women passed through its doors, finding peace and clarity in its quiet beauty. 10 years after the divorce, I was sitting on that back porch at sunset, working on my 3rd book, when I received an unexpected email. It was from Marcus, the first time I'd heard from him in years. "Dear Angela," it read, "I hope this message finds you well and happy. I'm writing from Guatemala, where I've been working with an organization that builds schools in rural communities. It's humbling work, physically demanding and emotionally challenging, but it's the first time in my life I've felt like I'm doing something that matters beyond my own ego and ambition. I've thought about you often over the years, wondered how you were doing, if you'd found the happiness my father wanted for you. I hope you have. I hope you've built a beautiful life, filled with people who appreciate you and endeavors that fulfill you. I've been in therapy consistently since I last saw you, working through the patterns and beliefs that led me to make such destructive choices. I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness or to try to justify what I did. I'm writing because my therapist encouraged me to make amends where possible, and I wanted you to know that I understand now what I destroyed when I betrayed you. You were loyal, kind, supportive, and loving. You were everything a partner should be, and I threw that away because I confused excitement with love, novelty with value. I hurt you deeply, and I will carry that regret for the rest of my life. I heard about your book, about the foundation, about the work you're doing to help other women. I'm proud of you, Angela, for turning your pain into purpose, for using what happened to you as fuel to help others. That takes a strength and grace I never possessed. I wish you every happiness in your life. You deserve it more than anyone I know. Warmly, Marcus. I read the email twice, feeling a complex mix of emotions. There was still some anger there, some residual pain from the betrayal. But there was also something like closure, a sense that this chapter of my life was truly finished. I wrote back briefly, thanking him for the apology and wishing him well in his work. I didn't tell him about Daniel, about the farmhouse, about the details of the life I'd built. That wasn't his business anymore. But I could acknowledge his growth, could appreciate that he was trying to become a better man, even if it was too late to save our marriage. Was that hard? Daniel asked, looking up from his own book as I set my laptop aside. Not as hard as I expected, I admitted. There was a time when hearing from Marcus would have destroyed me, would have brought all the pain rushing back. But enough time has passed, enough healing has happened, that I can read his words with something like detachment. He's part of my past, not my present, and that feels right. Your past made you who you are, Daniel said thoughtfully. The pain, the betrayal, the rebuilding, all of it brought you to this moment, to the woman you are now. He was right. I wouldn't have chosen the path I'd walked, wouldn't have volunteered for the pain and humiliation of discovering Marcus's betrayal. But I also wouldn't trade the person I'd become, the life I'd built from the ruins of my marriage. I'd learned that I was stronger than I'd known, more resilient than I'd imagined. I'd learned that financial independence mattered, that having my own resources and my own identity separate from my marriage was crucial. I'd learned to trust my instincts, to pay attention to the signs I'd ignored before. Most importantly, I'd learned that endings could also be beginnings, that the destruction of one dream could create space for new dreams to grow. 15 years after that terrible afternoon when I'd come home early and caught Marcus's betrayal, I sat on the back porch of Harrison's Haven, surrounded by the women I'd helped over the years, celebrating the anniversary of the foundation. Emma had flown in from California, where she now lived with her husband and 2 children. Daniel sat beside me, his hand warm in mine. The sunset painted the sky in brilliant colors, and I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the life I'd built. I want to say something, I announced, standing to address the group. 15 years ago, I thought my life was ending. I'd discovered my husband's betrayal. I was facing divorce at 50 years old, and I couldn't imagine how I would survive, let alone thrive. But I had something precious, something that made all the difference. I had someone who believed in me, who saw my worth when I couldn't see it myself, who gave me the resources and encouragement to rebuild my life. I held up a photo of Harrison, taken just a few months before his death. Harrison Thornton wasn't perfect. He made mistakes as a father and a businessman, but he got one thing absolutely right. He saw me not as his son's wife or his granddaughter's mother, but as Angela, a woman with value and potential beyond any role I played in his family, And he gave me the gift of freedom, the ability to choose myself and my own happiness. I looked around at the faces of the women gathered on the porch, women who'd survived their own betrayals and were rebuilding their own lives. I want you all to know that you have that same value, that same potential. Whatever brought you here, whatever pain you're carrying, it doesn't define you. You are not your failed marriage or your ex-husband's betrayal or the mistakes you made when you were trying to survive. You are capable of building something beautiful from the wreckage of what came before. The applause was thunderous, and I saw tears on many faces. These were my people, my tribe, women who understood the particular pain of betrayal and the hard-won joy of rebuilding. As the celebration wound down and the sunset faded to twilight, I found myself alone on the porch with Emma. She'd been quiet most of the evening, lost in her own thoughts. "You okay, sweetheart?" I asked, sitting beside her. "I've been thinking about Grandpa," she said quietly. "About how he knew what Dad would do, how he tried to protect you. I never really understood before how much he must have loved you to go to such lengths." "He gave me a precious gift," I agreed. "Not just the money or the property, but the validation. He told me, through his will and his letters, that I mattered, that I had worth, that I deserved to be protected and cared for. That's something I'd started to doubt during my marriage to your father." "I'm glad you found Daniel," Emma said. "I'm glad you didn't let what Dad did make you give up on love entirely." "I almost did," I admitted. "For a long time, I thought I'd never trust another man again. But Daniel showed me that not all men are like your father, that it's possible to build a partnership based on mutual respect and genuine affection. Your father taught me what I didn't want. Daniel showed me what I did want." "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't come home early that day?" Emma asked. "If you hadn't caught Dad with Victoria?" "Sometimes," I said honestly, "but I don't think it would have changed the outcome, just delayed it. Marcus was on a path that would have led to betrayal eventually. Coming home early just forced the truth into the light sooner. And maybe that was a blessing, because it meant I was still young enough, strong enough, to rebuild. If I'd discovered the truth 10 years later, at 60 instead of 50, it would have been so much harder." We sat in comfortable silence, mother and daughter, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. I thought about the woman I'd been 15 years ago, so trusting, so naive, so certain that her marriage was solid. I mourned for her innocence and her illusions. But I also celebrated her, because she'd survived, she'd adapted, she'd grown into someone stronger and wiser. The next morning, I woke early and went for a walk on the property. The Vermont autumn was in full swing, the trees a riot of reds and golds and oranges. I walked to the highest point on the land, where you could see for miles in every direction, and I thought about the journey I'd taken to get here. From betrayed wife to divorced woman, from dependent spouse to financially independent, from broken to healing to thriving. It hadn't been easy. There had been dark nights when I'd wondered if I'd made the right choice, if I should have fought harder for my marriage. There had been moments of crushing loneliness, times when I'd reached for my phone to call Marcus before remembering that he wasn't my person anymore. But there had also been moments of pure joy, discoveries of capabilities I didn't know I possessed. The first time I'd negotiated a major donation for the foundation. The day my book hit the bestseller list. The evening Daniel had proposed. Emma's wedding. The birth of my first grandchild. All of these moments had been richer, more meaningful, because I'd earned them through my own effort and growth. I pulled out my phone and opened the Notes app, wanting to capture my thoughts. "Betrayal changed me," I wrote. "It broke me open and forced me to examine who I was beneath the roles I'd played for so long. It hurt more than I can express, left scars that will never fully fade. But it also set me free. Free to discover my own strength, free to build a life on my own terms, free to love again, this time with clear eyes and an open heart. Harrison gave me the means to survive that betrayal. But I chose to do more than survive. I chose to thrive. I saved the note, knowing it would become part of my next book, another chapter in the story of transformation and healing that had become my life's work. As I walked back to the farmhouse, I saw Daniel on the porch, 2 cups of coffee steaming in the morning air. He smiled when he saw me, that warm, genuine smile that still made my heart skip a beat after years together. "Good walk?" he asked, handing me a cup. "The best," I said, settling into the chair beside him. I was thinking about how far I've come, how different my life is from what I imagined 15 years ago. "Better or worse?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "Different," I said thoughtfully. "Not better or worse, just different. I lost things I valued, a marriage I'd invested decades in, a life I'd carefully constructed. But I gained things too. Self-knowledge, independence, purpose, and you. Always me," he said with a grin. "I'm the bonus prize in your redemption story." I laughed, swatting his arm. "You're much more than a bonus prize. You're proof that good things can come from bad situations, that endings can lead to beautiful new beginnings." We sat together in companionable silence, watching the morning light paint the valley below in shades of gold. This was my life now, I thought with deep satisfaction. Not the life I'd planned, not the life I'd expected, but a life I'd chosen with intention and courage. A life built on the foundation Harrison had given me, shaped by the lessons I'd learned from Marcus's betrayal, enriched by the love Daniel offered so freely. I thought about that woman who'd pulled into the driveway 15 years ago, who'd walked through those oak doors expecting nothing more than a normal evening at home. I wished I could go back and tell her that she was stronger than she knew, that the pain ahead would be terrible but survivable, that she would emerge from the fire forged into something new and beautiful. But maybe that was the point. Maybe we all had to walk through our own fires, face our own betrayals, discover our own strength in the crucible of suffering. Maybe that was the only way to truly know who we were beneath the roles we played and the expectations others had of us. "Thank you," I said to Daniel, though the words were inadequate for everything I felt. "For what?" he asked, puzzled. "For seeing me," I said, "for valuing me, for building a partnership with me instead of trying to own me or control me or change me, for being the kind of man Harrison hoped Marcus would become." Daniel took my hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on my palm. "It's easy to value you, Angela. You're remarkable. You took devastation and turned it into purpose. You took pain and transformed it into compassion. You're not just a survivor, you're a victor." As the sun climbed higher in the sky, burning away the morning mist, I felt a profound sense of peace settle over me. This was what Harrison had wanted for me. This contentment, this self-assurance, this knowledge that I was exactly where I was meant to be. The betrayal had been real, the pain had been excruciating, but it had also been the catalyst for the most important transformation of my life. I'd gone from being someone's wife to being fully, completely myself. And that, I realized, was the greatest inheritance Harrison could have left me. Not the money, not the property, but the opportunity to discover who Angela was when she wasn't defined by her relationship to anyone else. I raised my coffee cup in a silent toast to Harrison, to the wisdom he'd shown in protecting me, to the love he'd demonstrated in giving me freedom. And then I turned to Daniel, to the life we were building together, to the future that stretched before us, full of possibility and promise. The past would always be part of me. The betrayal, the divorce, the painful rebuilding, all of it had shaped who I'd become. But it didn't define me anymore. I was Angela Cole, author, philanthropist, advocate for women in transition, wife to Daniel, mother to Emma, grandmother to 2 beautiful children, and I was happy. Not the shallow, unexamined happiness I'd felt in my marriage to Marcus, when I'd been too busy maintaining the illusion of perfection to notice the cracks in the foundation. But deep, authentic happiness that came from living in alignment with my values, from doing work that mattered, from loving and being loved without conditions or pretense. I'd arrived home early that November afternoon 15 years ago and caught Marcus's betrayal. Weeks later, the inheritance had revealed itself, not just the money, but the true gift of freedom and validation. And in the years since, I'd built a life beyond anything I could have imagined in those dark early days of divorce. This was my story, I realized. Not a story of betrayal, though that was part of it, but a story of transformation, of resilience, of choosing myself even when it would have been easier to settle for less. A story of ending and beginning, of death and rebirth, of discovering that sometimes the worst thing that happens to us becomes the doorway to the best thing that could have happened. And as I sat there with Daniel beside me, the Vermont mountains stretching into the distance, Harrison's legacy alive in every woman who found refuge and renewal at the Haven, I knew with absolute certainty that I would choose this life, this version of myself, every single time. The betrayal had been the end of one story, but it had also been the beginning of another. And this new story, the one I was still writing, the one that would continue long after this perfect morning faded into memory, this story was mine. Fully, completely, beautifully mine.